So William and Catherine have officially packed their bags and fled Windsor estate in the dead of night, leaving behind the place they once called their ultimate safe haven. But what forced the Prince and Princess of Wales to make such an emergency, heart-stopping escape isn't just another royal feud or a leaked palace memo. It is quite literally the most horrifying, spine-chilling discovery ever made inside a royal residence. Imagine going to bed believing your children are protected by the most elite security network on Earth, only to wake up to absolute, unadulterated terror. Deep beneath the peaceful floorboards of Adelaide Cottage, beneath the very rooms where Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis were fast asleep, structural inspectors uncovered something so disturbing that it instantly triggered a full-scale evacuation protocol. We are not talking about structural decay or a simple security glitch. We are talking about a secret, long-forgotten underground network, and undeniable evidence of recent, highly calculated human presence right under their feet. Fresh footprints in the dust, modern gear, and stalker-level surveillance photographs documenting the family's private daily movements. Someone was directly underneath their home while they slept above. Who managed to bypass elite royal security? How long had this unspeakable violation been happening undetected? And why is the palace terrified of the full truth leaking to the public? Hold on tight, because what was discovered that night at Windsor will change everything you thought you knew about the crown forever. To fully comprehend the sheer magnitude of this unprecedented nightmare, we have to look back at why Adelaide Cottage was chosen in the first place, and the deceptive sense of peace that masked an escalating, invisible threat. It was meant to be the ultimate escape. For years, Prince William and Catherine felt trapped inside the golden cage of Kensington Palace, a place constantly surrounded by tourist crowds, flashing camera lenses, and the suffocating pressure of constant public observation. They desperately wanted a sanctuary, a quiet, private haven where Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis could enjoy a grounded, normal childhood away from the relentless global spotlight. When they made the monumental move to Adelaide Cottage on the historic Windsor estate, it was framed to the world as a fresh, idyllic beginning. A picturesque four-bedroom home nestled surrounded by lush green lawns, ancient trees, and state-of-the-art security perimeters. It seemed like a dream. But behind palace walls, whispers were already circulating that the move was far more urgent than the public was ever led to believe. Royal insiders have long hinted that the Waleses were seeking an escape not just from public scrutiny, but from an unsettling string of mysterious security anomalies that had begun plaguing their private spaces. For months leading up to the move, small, inexplicable disruptions had started to unsettle the family. Unmarked drones lingering just outside thermal camera ranges, strange disruptions in encrypted communications, and subtle, unaccounted-for blips in security logs. Yet, every single time a concern was raised, high-ranking palace officials dismissed it as routine technical glitches or overcautious paranoia. William, whose military background instilled in him an unyielding instinct for threat assessment, reportedly voiced deep frustrations over these rising vulnerabilities. But the overarching narrative pushed by the royal household remained rigid. Windsor was impenetrable. The estate was a fortress guarded by elite protection officers, cutting-edge infrared motion detectors, and round-the-clock physical patrols. They were told they were completely safe. That illusion of absolute safety, however, was built on a catastrophic historical oversight. The Windsor grounds are not merely manicured lawns and historic masonry. They sit atop a vast, sprawling subterranean labyrinth constructed across centuries of turbulent British history. Dating back to the English Civil War, and later expanded during World War II as bomb shelters for the royal family. A dark web of underground escape routes, secret emergency passages, and service tunnels weave silently beneath the entire estate. Over the decades, as modern security shifted its entire focus upward, to facial recognition cameras, perimeter fencing, guard posts, and satellite surveillance, the world deep beneath the soil was slowly forgotten. Decades of archived property maps were misfiled, classified subterranean surveys were buried in forgotten vaults, and the physical access hatches were swallowed by overgrown foliage and historic brickwork. While the security apparatus was busy looking at the gates and monitoring the skies, a silent vulnerability was sitting completely wide open beneath their feet. Leaked reports from deep within the intelligence apparatus now suggest that this massive subterranean blind spot had been flagged in a classified review years ago, but the staggering financial cost and logistical nightmare of mapping ancient tunnels meant the warnings were repeatedly shelved. It was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, a fatal flaw in the heart of the royal security infrastructure. And then, the subtle warnings began to escalate into terrifying reality. Staff members at Adelaide Cottage privately reported strange, unexplainable phenomena that were brushed off as the quirks of an aging historic building. Subtle vibrations under the flooring during the dead of night. Unexplained drops in air pressure in the basement corridors. Faint, muffled thuds echoing through the walls when entire household was supposed to be fast asleep. Catherine, whose maternal instincts are fiercely sharp, reportedly expressed a growing, chilling sense of unease about the cottage. She noted to close friends that the house felt strange at night, that despite the heavy security presence right outside their doors, an eerie atmosphere hung over the halls. Yet, because there was never any physical breach detected on the surface perimeters, these haunting warnings were ignored. Security teams checked the doors, verified the window locks, reviewed the outer camera feeds, and assured the Prince and Princess of Wales that no intruder had stepped foot on the grounds. They were looking in the wrong direction. The danger wasn't trying to scale the outer fences or break through the front doors. The danger was already inside the perimeter, moving silently through the pitch-black void beneath the floorboards, carefully studying the family's every move, learning their exact sleep cycles, and waiting for the right moment. The tension building within the household was a pressure cooker on the verge of bursting, setting the stage for a breach so deep, so invasive, and so terrifying that it would shatter the family's peace forever. It was roughly 1:15 midnight on a freezing Tuesday night in late November when the fragile illusion of safety shattered into absolute, chaotic terror. William and Catherine had gone to bed hours earlier, believing their children were sleeping peacefully just down the hall. The cottage was deathly quiet, shrouded in the heavy silence of the Windsor countryside. But deep in the lower level of the house, embedded thermal sensors, installed as part of a routine secondary defense system, suddenly picked up an anomaly. It wasn't a sudden power surge or a stray animal on the lawn. It was a distinct, localized shift in thermal density and air pressure originating from directly beneath the home's foundation. William woke up instantly, his military training kicking in before his eyes even fully adjusted to the dark. Something felt catastrophically wrong. Seconds later, a soft, urgent knock echoed against their bedroom door. Standing in the dim hallway was Marcus Headley, their chief personal protection officer, accompanied by 3 heavily armed tactical guards. His face was completely drained of color. Without uttering a full sentence, Headley communicated the urgency of the moment. They had to evacuate right now. What Headley reported in hushed, panicked tones was harrowing. Structural engineers conducting late-night subterranean radar sweeps for a planned drainage project had stumbled into a gaping, unmapped void beneath the cottage. Upon breaching the brickwork, armed officers entered a pitch-black, centuries-old tunnel network, and what they found inside sent shockwaves through the entire royal security apparatus. This wasn't an abandoned, dusty ruin. It was an active, meticulously maintained operational base. Investigators discovered fresh footprints imprinted in the light dust, pristine tools with zero rust, empty water bottles with recent purchase dates, a clean folding chair, a thermal blanket, and a battery-powered communications rig. But the most horrifying detail, the item that caused Catherine to completely break down in sheer panic, was a wall covered in photos. Dozens of high-resolution, recent surveillance photographs of the Wales family were pinned up in the dark subterranean chamber. Photos of Prince George getting into a school car, Princess Charlotte playing in the garden, Prince Louis looking out his bedroom window, and Catherine on her private morning runs. Every single picture was taken from terrifyingly close, upward angles that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the stalker had been observing them from secret vantage grates hidden right around the house. Someone had been living directly beneath them while they slept, tracking their every move, learning their daily routines, and mapping their vulnerable moments for months. Panic exploded through the hallways of Adelaide Cottage. Catherine didn't wait for further instructions. She sprinted down the corridor to her children's bedrooms, her heart pounding against her ribs as she desperately gathered George, Charlotte, and Louis from their warm beds. The children were bewildered, foggy with sleep, and terrified by the sight of armed officers filling their home. 9-year-old Charlotte looked up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes and asked the one question that sliced straight through Catherine's heart. "Are we safe here, Mommy?" Catherine froze, her voice trembling as she swallowed back tears, unable to offer a convincing promise. Within 7 minutes, the family was rushed into blacked-out SUVs waiting on the drive with engines roaring. At 12:43 a.m., the motorcade sped away into the freezing night toward a secure, undisclosed location at Kensington Palace, leaving behind a property that was instantly transformed into a massive, heavily guarded crime scene. By morning, the news of the sudden royal departure began leaking to the press, sparking a wildfire of global speculation. Online platforms erupted as royalty fans and investigative sleuths tried to piece together what had happened. At Royal Insider Leaks. Urgent. Heavy armed police presence at Adelaide Cottage right now. Forensic tents are up, and armed response units have locked down the entire Windsor perimeter. William and Kate left in a high-speed convoy at 1 a.m. What is the palace hiding? At Windsor Watchdog, leaked reports claim MI5 is involved. This isn't just a security scare. It's a massive breach. Sources say the Wales family was evacuated under Code Red protocols. Something unthinkable happened inside the house last night. As the public frenzy reached a boiling point, the palace released a cold, highly sanitized statement attempting to downplay the crisis, claiming the family had relocated temporarily due to scheduled infrastructure maintenance and environmental assessments. But the lie immediately crumbled when a massive twist broke the story wide open. A highly classified report, leaked from inside Scotland Yard's Royalty and Specialist Protection Command, revealed the first terrifying twist. The subterranean tunnel network didn't just sit underneath Adelaide Cottage. Using ground-penetrating radar, forensic teams discovered that the secret passages extended for miles beneath the Windsor estate, connecting Adelaide Cottage directly to 4 other major royal residences, including Frogmore Cottage, Royal Lodge, and the inner sanctum of Windsor Castle itself. The stalker hadn't just breached William and Catherine's home. They had gained unrestricted, invisible access to the entire heart of the British monarchy. Every line of defense had been rendered completely useless, leaving the entire royal family exposed to an unknown phantom who had been walking among them in the dark for years. By the afternoon of day 2, the quiet estate of Windsor had transformed into a fortress of military-grade chaos. White forensic tents stretched across the lawns like ghost structures, blocking the sight lines of hovering news helicopters. Below the manicured turf, counterterrorism experts, forensic scientists, and historians from the Royal Collection Trust work shoulder to shoulder in the claustrophobic darkness of the tunnel system. Every step they took, every swab of dust, deepened the terrifying reality of what the Prince and Princess of Wales had been living above. The crisis escalated rapidly beyond a local police matter. MI5 stepped in, declaring the subterranean breach a national security breach of the highest order. Digital forensics units seized memory cards and surveillance logs, analyzing the metadata from the photographs recovered at the scene. What they discovered made the blood of senior investigators run cold. The timestamp data embedded in the recovered photos revealed that the surveillance was not a recent operation. It had been ongoing for nearly 2 years. Every single milestone the Wales family had celebrated at Adelaide Cottage had been silently documented from beneath. Private birthday parties in the garden, late-night walks, children playing near the windows, and intimate family dinners had all been photographed with military-grade night vision lenses. The stalker knew their schedule better than their own security detail. They knew the exact minute shift changes occurred, when thermal sensors were cycled for maintenance, and which rooms were occupied at any given hour. While the family remained isolated inside the fortified walls of Kensington Palace, trying to shelter George, Charlotte, and Louis from the truth, the story exploded across the global digital landscape. Despite the palace's desperate attempts to enforce a media blackout, leaks from inside the investigation flooded social media platforms, sparking a worldwide frenzy. At Royal Truth Hunter, thread, the Adelaide Cottage incident is 100x worse than what the BBC is reporting. Sources inside MI5 confirm they found an active living setup right under Prince Louis's bedroom. Someone was sleeping beneath the royal family. How did royal protection miss this for 2 years? Thread backhand index pointing down. At Global News Flash. Breaking. Emergency meetings currently taking place at Buckingham Palace. King Charles, Prince William, and top intelligence officials are discussing a complete overhaul of royal housing. Reports indicate multiple properties are compromised. At Security Exposed. If an intruder could live under Adelaide Cottage undetected for years, what else is hidden under Windsor? The British royal family's defense network has collapsed. Heads need to roll at Scotland Yard. International news outlets picked up the online firestorm, broadcasting live updates from outside Kensington Palace and Windsor Castle. Royal commentators, former protection officers, and intelligence experts filled the airwaves, debating the catastrophic failure of the Crown's security infrastructure. The narrative was no longer about a routine evacuation. It was a public relations and national security disaster that threatened to destabilize the public's faith in the monarchy's competence. Inside the palace walls, King Charles called an emergency council at Clarence House. The king, who had navigated decades of security scares and media intrusions, was visibly shaken. The phone call between Charles and William was described by insiders as heated and emotionally raw. William was furious. demanding answers for how his wife and children were exposed to such horrific vulnerability, while the household had repeatedly assured him that Windsor was impenetrable. Then came the second, utterly terrifying twist. The revelation that completely altered the trajectory of the investigation. Deep within the furthest reaches of the tunnel system, in a narrow crawl space that required investigators to maneuver on their stomachs, forensic teams made a second discovery. Hidden behind a loose slab of 17th-century masonry was a waterproof container containing personal journals, detailed hand-drawn maps, and annotated architectural blueprints. The handwriting inside the journals was tight, obsessive, and grew increasingly chaotic in the later entries. This was not the work of a hired mercenary, a foreign intelligence agency, or a paparazzi photographer looking for a quick payout. The journals belonged to a man named Malcolm Hendricks, a 47-year-old former museum curator and disgraced royal historian who had vanished 3 years prior. Hendricks had become utterly consumed by an obsessive conspiracy theory regarding lost Civil War treasures allegedly buried beneath Windsor by King Charles I. However, as the journal entries progressed, his academic obsession had curdled into a dark, parasocial delusion. Hendricks had convinced himself that the Wales family was deliberately residing at Adelaide Cottage to hide the historical secrets from him. The final pages of his journal contained disturbing, manifesto-like ramblings, detailing his belief that he had been chosen to reclaim what was under the house, and that he was preparing to make direct contact with the family. The realization sent a shockwave through the investigation command center. The intruder wasn't just watching them from afar. He was building up the psychological nerve to step out of the shadows and confront them inside their home. And as intelligence officers cross-referenced Hendricks's digital footprint and vehicle records, they stumbled upon the most haunting detail of all. When armed tactical teams raided a rented cottage 3 miles outside the Windsor estate, they found the premises abandoned in extreme haste. The coffee in the mug on the table was still warm. Hendricks had somehow intercepted police radio frequencies during the midnight evacuation, realized his underground lair had been compromised, and fled into the night minutes before officers arrived. He was out there in the wind, equipped with intimate knowledge of the family's movements, highly sophisticated surveillance tools, and an obsession that had pushed him to the brink of madness. The threat wasn't over. It had just moved from the dark underground directly into the open world. The moment the name Malcolm Hendricks leaked to the press alongside the revelation of an active, uncaptured stalker, the global media ecosystem went into absolute meltdown. What had begun as whispers of a royal relocation exploded into a full-scale international panic. The public reaction was instant, ferocious, and deeply divided, tearing social media apart and forcing every major media outlet to cover the crisis around the clock. On platforms like TikTok, X, and YouTube, the story dominated trending topics worldwide for days on end. Millions of viewers parsed through every leaked detail, producing endless breakdown videos, theories, and dramatic reenactments. The internet split into 2 fierce camps, those terrified for the family's safety and demanding severe accountability from Scotland Yard, and conspiracy theorists who claimed the entire narrative was a staged distraction to cover up deeper palace scandals. At @RoyalWatcher_UK, imagine putting your children to bed thinking you are protected by the best security team on earth, only to find out a deeply disturbed stalker was living under their floorboards for 2 years. The level of incompetence at the palace is sickening. William and Catherine have every right to never step foot in Windsor again. At TruthSeeker99, am I the only one who finds the timing of this tunnel stalker story extremely suspicious? Suddenly they vanish overnight, and we're supposed to believe a disgraced curator lived under the house undetected? What are they really hiding at Adelaide Cottage? At SecurityPro_den, as a former intelligence officer, this is the single greatest security failure in modern British history. A rogue actor had unrestricted physical access to the future king's children. If he wanted to do physical harm, nobody would have stopped him. Scotland Yard's Royalty Protection Division needs to be dismantled. The mainstream news media was no less chaotic. Cable news networks ran live countdown timers monitoring the ongoing police manhunt across the United Kingdom. Broadcasts featured heated debates between former Met Police commissioners, psychological profilers, and royal biographers. Primetime news anchors openly questioned whether the British monarchy could actually protect its own heirs in the modern digital age, pointing out that an elitist state had been compromised not by a high-tech military squad, but by a lone, obsessed ex-curator armed with archival blueprints and ground-penetrating radar. The political fallout was swift and brutal. Members of Parliament called for an emergency parliamentary inquiry into the funding and management of royal security protocols. The Home Secretary was forced to issue a public statement outside Downing Street, assuring the nation that counterterrorism agencies, MI5, and local police forces were utilizing every available resource to hunt down Malcolm Hendricks. Behind closed doors at Kensington Palace, the emotional toll on Prince William and Catherine was devastating. The Princess of Wales, who had worked for over a decade to construct a serene, balanced environment for her children, was reportedly consumed by a mix of profound grief and incandescent rage. Friends close to the family leaked that Catherine refused to let the children out of her sight, keeping George, Charlotte, and Louis within the heavily fortified inner apartments of Kensington Palace under 24-hour armed guard. Prince George, at 11 years old, was old enough to read the news notifications flashing across tablets and overheard adult conversations. The young prince began asking pointed, terrifying questions about why a stranger wanted to take pictures of his bedroom. 9-year-old Charlotte grew hypervigilant, constantly checking door locks and window handles, while 6-year-old Prince Louis suffered from recurring nightmares about people under the floor. The industry backlash against the royal security apparatus reached a crescendo when high-ranking officials within Scotland Yard began turning on each other in an effort to avoid blame. Leaked internal emails published by major news outlets revealed a paper trail of ignored warnings. Security engineers had flagged unexplained acoustic anomalies near Adelaide Cottage 18 months prior, but lower-level supervisors had dismissed the reports as settling foundations and tree roots to avoid the massive financial cost of mapping historical tunnels. Public anger boiled over as citizens realized that tax pounds had funded a security system that failed at its most basic duty, keeping a young family safe in their own home. Crowds began gathering outside the gates of Kensington Palace, leaving flowers, cards, and plush toys in a surreal display of solidarity that felt more like the aftermath of a national tragedy than a security incident. As the days dragged on without an arrest, the atmosphere grew increasingly paranoid. The public began reporting Hendricks sightings across the country, from small towns in Wales to coastal villages in Scotland, triggering dozens of false police raids and keeping the public in a constant state of high anxiety. The narrative was spiraling out of control, fueled by the terrifying knowledge that a man had spent 2 years living in the dark beneath the royal family was still out there, watching, waiting, and completely unaccounted for. Just when the world believed the situation couldn't possibly get any more terrifying, a fresh wave of shockwaves tore through the intelligence community, completely shattering the narrative that Malcolm Hendricks was merely a lone, deranged stalker acting on isolated delusions. On the 4th week of the nationwide manhunt, digital forensic teams inside MI5's specialized cyber unit finally cracked the heavy, multi-layered encryption on a secondary hard drive recovered from Hendricks's abandoned rental cottage. What they uncovered inside did not just escalate the investigation. It sent an absolute chill through the highest corridors of global power. Hendricks wasn't working alone. The encrypted files contained a series of recent, high-level communications with an anonymous, highly organized underground network operating on the darkest corners of the encrypted web. This wasn't a casual chat forum for royal enthusiasts or history buffs. It was a deeply funded, shadowy syndicate dedicated to monitoring, tracking, and documenting the private lives of high-profile global figures through illegal, invasive means. Hendricks had been acting as their field operative, earning massive, untraceable cryptocurrency payments in exchange for uploading daily live feeds, audio recordings, and high-resolution surveillance data gathered from directly beneath Adelaide Cottage. For nearly 2 years, every private conversation between William and Catherine, every bedtime story read to the children, and every confidential phone call regarding state matters had been transmitted live to an unseen, paying audience across the globe. The royal family hadn't just been spied on by an obsessed historian. Their entire home had been turned into a covert, broadcasted surveillance hub without their knowledge. And then came the most devastating revelation of all, the twist that turned this national security disaster into an active, terrifying nightmare. As forensic experts analyzed the outgoing server logs from the encrypted drive, they discovered a data packet sent at precisely 12:35 a.m. on the night of the evacuation, just 8 minutes before William, Catherine, and the children fled the estate in their blacked-out motorcade. Hendricks hadn't just intercepted police radio frequencies to escape. He had received an automated, internal alert directly from a device synced to the palace's internal security network. Someone inside the royal family's immediate inner circle, someone with high-level clearance, access to real-time security tracking, and direct entry into Kensington Palace and Windsor estate, had tipped Hendricks off. The insider had warned him that the subterranean sweep was happening, giving him just enough time to vanish into the night before armed officers breached the tunnel. There was a mole inside the Crown's personal protection apparatus, When Prince William was briefed on this discovery inside a secure, soundproof bunker at Kensington Palace, witnesses report the Prince of Wales sat in complete, stone-cold silence. The realization was staggering. The person who helped facilitate the violation of his home, the person who helped broadcast his family's private life to a shadowy web network, was someone he likely saw every single day. Someone who stood near his children, someone who held open their car doors, someone who knew their every vulnerability. As night fell over London, Kensington Palace was placed under an unprecedented, blackout lockdown. Security clearances for dozens of royal staff members, protection officers, and domestic personnel were instantly revoked. Mobile devices were seized, private communications were monitored, and counter-espionage officers began sweeping every square inch of the palace apartments for hidden listening devices. William and Catherine now find themselves trapped in an unbearable reality. They cannot return to Adelaide Cottage. They cannot trust the very walls of Kensington Palace. And worst of all, they cannot look at their own security detail without wondering if the person standing guard outside their door is the very person who betrayed them. Malcolm Hendricks remains at large, carrying the rest of his encrypted archives, backed by a wealthy, dangerous syndicate that knows the royal family's deepest secrets. And inside the palace walls, the traitor remains completely unidentified, walking the corridors alongside the future king, who leaked the security alert to Hendricks minutes before the raid. How far up the royal chain of command does this betrayal actually go? And what will happen when a shadowy network decides to leak the private audio recordings to the world? The nightmare at Windsor is far from over. It is only just beginning. This is without a doubt the most harrowing, bone-chilling chapter in modern royal history, and the terrifying reality is that this story is unfolding in real time. The Prince and Princess of Wales are facing an invisible enemy, a dangerous mole operating inside their inner circle, and a fugitive who holds the private keys to their sanctuary. But now, we want to hear directly from you. Do you believe Malcolm Hendricks was acting as a rogue operative for a shadowy global syndicate? Or is this a massive cover-up designed to hide an even deeper palace secret? Who do you think the insider mole could be? A high-ranking security officer, a trusted domestic staff member, or someone even closer to the crown? And should William and Catherine cut ties with traditional royal residences entirely to keep George, Charlotte, and Louis safe? Sound off in the comments below. Drop your theories, join the debate, and let's get the discussion going. If this story sent chills down your spine, hit that like button right now to support the channel. Make sure to click subscribe and turn on all notifications so you don't miss our urgent follow-up investigation dropping very soon. We are actively tracking new leaks from Scotland Yard, and you will not want to miss the shocking revelation coming in our next episode. Thank you for watching Crown Watch. Stay vigilant, and we'll see you in the next update.